Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Cliff Ravenscraft Show, a podcast devoted to helping you take your message, your business, and your life to the next level. This, my friends, is episode number 485, and I am your host, Cliff Ravenscraft, the podcast answer man. And in this week's episode, we're going to talk about injecting more of you into your podcast and, well, maybe whether you should or should not do it. Of course, I'm not going to tell you what you should do, but I want to share with you some feedback that I recently got from Liz Fulcher. Now, Liz is the host of the Aromatic Wisdom podcast, and she sent me this message. She says, "Hi, Cliff. I have been binging on your podcast episodes, and I am so inspired in a way I hadn't expected. I began listening initially for golden nuggets on podcasting, and I got so much more. I didn't realize how much you share about yourself, your life, and your ideas. I'm inspired because I hold all of that back on my podcast, and I try to deliver just the facts, ma'am, and do share a bit about me, but I felt like I might be taking advantage of their attention to do so. That's my favorite part of your episodes," with an exclamation mark. "Being in someone's ear is a highly intimate medium, and I now see how it lends itself to being personal. I'm going to begin to add more and more bits of Liz into my podcast episodes. Thanks for giving. I'm considering your podcast course, but I've been podcasting for 1.5 years, and though I have a ton to learn, I'm not an absolute newbie. Blessings to you, brotherpreneur, Liz." Well, Liz, first and foremost, thank you so much for your feedback. And I'm always encouraged by people who write to me and talk to me about how much they enjoy this format. Because to be honest with you, I am often concerned myself of whether or not I'm taking advantage of people's attention. You know, people who are drawn to my show because they see me as an industry leading expert in the field of podcasting, and they come here for these podcasting nuggets. And when I start talking about how my day is going and all these and how busy my week has been and what I've been working on behind the scenes here to do my business, I wonder how much of the folks who come here for podcasting are really interested in hearing that. But what I'm finding is that more and more people are coming out of the woodwork to tell me, "Hey, Cliff, I really love the format of your show. I really love hearing your stories. I love hearing just your ideas." And, you know, I've had a number of people over the years tell me this and encourage me in this area. And it's one of the reasons why I made the decision a long time ago to go ahead and bring more of me to my podcast. Now, here's the interesting thing. For those of you who've been listening to this podcast feed for years, this show used to be called Podcast Answer Man. But what you're getting here is just a tad bit of what I used to do in a show called Pursuing a Balanced Life. There is over 600 episodes of that podcast. By the way, that show is no longer available anywhere online, so don't go looking for it. You won't find it. Well, actually, that's not true. You can go over to GSPN. Actually, I think you can just still go to pursuingabalancedlife.com and you can actually find it on the website. But the podcast feed is gone. There's a reason for that, and since I brought it up, I guess I should tell you. The idea is that I plan on doing something interesting with all of those recorded episodes. And some of the things that I hope to do is to pull out nuggets of information that I shared in those episodes where I was out walking through the neighborhood or whatever, just randomly sharing thoughts about what's going on in my life as I'm building this business, turning it from a hobby into a full-time career. And I mean, literally the last 11 years of my life have been documented in an audio journal format in a podcast that used to be out there called Pursuing a Balanced Life. Again, you can go over to pursuingabalancedlife.com and check that out. Or if you go to gspn.tv/start here, that would be a great place to start. That will document the beginning of my fitness journey, which started on November 14th, 2014, I believe. And I've been working out 6 days a week minimum every week for the past 2 years now, going, well over 2 years now. and my life is so much different as a result of that journey that I shared in those episodes. So if you want to check that out, gspn.tv/start here. But anyway, I've been bringing more of me to my podcast, and I'm blessed by the people who are sharing, hey, yeah, I love this. Keep it up. And I love it just thrills my heart when she says, that's my favorite part of your episodes, with an exclamation mark. So yeah, if that's true for you guys, if you're listening to me and you say, I haven't written into Cliff and told him how much I really just tune in and I love to hear him talk about anything he wants to talk about. If that's you, would you let me know? Because every now and then I do get one or two people, and I'm talking about one or two people a quarter. You never more frequent than that, but I do get some people who will either leave me a 1-star review on this podcast in iTunes that talks, that talks about the fact that I don't talk about podcasting enough, or that I just talk about my life. It's all about me. And occasionally I'll get an email from somebody that gives me some negative feedback that, that I wish you'd just bring a little bit more content to the show. I really miss the old days when you just talked about podcasting and tech, all the stuff related to podcasting week after week. And I hope that you bring some more of that back. I mean, again, maybe in all of 2016, I probably had maybe 5 or 6 people who said that. And, those 5 or 6 people it's just crazy. The number of people, you could have 150 people reach out to you and give you an email just like Liz did. It says, this is my favorite part of your show. The fact that you share your ideas, that's not just limited to just let's stick to the facts, ma'am. I love that you just are who you are. You bring your life into it. And I feel so much more connected to you as a host. And I can have 150 people give me this email, but it's just weird how a handful of people, and literally you can count them on one hand, the number of people who will say something contrary to that, and how that can cause you to question what you're doing with your show. And so just know this, your feedback is important to the people you listen to. And gosh, this is something I wish I was better at. This is something that I ask you guys to do. Hey, send me an email. Let me know if you enjoy what I'm doing here. And you notice I don't actually say, hey, send me an email, and if you don't like what I'm doing here, send me an email. No, I'm not going to ask you to do that. Trust me, the 5 or 6 that I might get in an entire year is enough. And by the way, what is it? What is it about people that they feel like they have to go and complain? Why not just unsubscribe? I don't understand that. Why do you have to go? I mean, it's a bit of work to pull up the podcast app or the iTunes desktop app and to go in and navigate to the actual podcast in the store listing, and then click on reviews, then write a review, just so you could write a negative 1-star review about somebody's podcast. I mean, what type of person does that? I mean, it's like, do you feel like this is your purpose in the world so that you can save people? Actually, I had a podcast a long time ago called The Lost Podcast, and I remember that one of the persons like, I'm doing this because people must be saved from the mediocrity or it's like, I'm saving the world by trying to warn them to please read this review so that you will not waste a second of your life by listening to this mindless dribble. I'm not kidding you. That's one of my reviews in my Lost podcast from years ago. But anyway, I don't understand. It's going off on a whole different tangent, but I love this. So Liz, thank you for your feedback. And it's interesting that this feedback from Liz came in just like 2 days ago. And this morning, as I was preparing my breakfast, I noticed Paul Spain, a great friend of mine, posted this on Facebook. He says, after recording over 340 podcast episodes, I finally plucked up the courage to have a go at doing a solo one with just me and no guests to lean on. I talk about some recent things going on in my world, and why I think we all need to be futurists. I hope you enjoy it. Paul Spain, I know that you're listening, and here's the deal. I consider Paul Spain to be a very good friend at these days. We don't talk as much as I would love to, but I got to meet Paul when he invited me to come out to New Zealand and speak at Podcast New Zealand or Asia Pacific Podcast Conference. And not only that, but he put me up in a home that he owned that he was renting out, but it didn't have any tenants at the time. He put me up in his home, gave me his card for the 10 days that I was there. Spent an entire day driving me out to the Hobbiton movie set in Matamata, and just opened up a world of opportunity for me to experience New Zealand for 10 days last year. And I just really got to know Paul and really connected with him there. And so as a result of that, I wanted to check out some of Paul's podcasts. And I did listen to his podcast. But the thing is I'm already a diehard, devoted This Week in Tech listener, Mac Break Weekly. And the number of shows that I listen to on a consistent, ongoing basis are pretty much already, I don't do a lot of change. I'm still listening to the same podcast today that I was listening to 5 years ago. And actually, I still listen to the same podcast today that I was listening to 10 years ago. The only additions today are probably the Ray Edwards show I didn't probably listen to 10 years ago because I don't think he was doing the show back then. And I didn't know Mark Mason as well as I do today. And so, but yeah, anyway, all of that to say this is, Paul, I've checked out a couple episodes of your New Zealand Tech podcast and a couple other shows that you do, and I never subscribe to them, but it's not because your shows aren't great. They don't provide a lot of interesting content. It's just that it's not necessarily the type of show that I would typically be looking to add to my list of regular listening. But here's the interesting thing. As soon as I read this morning, I'm like, dude, I am totally instantly downloading episode number 317 of the New Zealand Tech podcast. I would love to hear some of the recent things going on in his world. And also, I'd love to hear Paul solo talking about his thoughts on technology. And here's the thing is I want to do that because I'm connected to Paul. I have a relationship with Paul. And so I think that's an important thing. Some of this stuff only really works if there's a relationship that's established. So for example, with Liz, for example, I'm sure that if there wasn't the dangling, enticing fruit of podcast information, Liz would have never cared who Cliff Ravenscraft is, and she would have never cared about a show called The Cliff Ravenscraft Show. She wouldn't be all that interested in hearing what's going on in my life and hearing what I'm doing in my business and all the ideas that Cliff Ravenscraft has. She came to know, like, and trust Cliff Ravenscraft, talking about himself in the third person right now, which, by the way, I used to do that as a joke a lot in some other podcasts I do, and I used to get negative 1-star reviews for that as well. I'm probably due for a 1-star review, so bring it on, people. I don't care. I used to care Actually, that's not true. I do care. I do. Every time you send me a 1-star review, I shouldn't tell you this because I'm just inviting them now. But every time you send me a little 1-star, a little part of my soul dies. All right, but that's okay because I got Jesus in my heart and he resurrects it, and I'm over you over a very short period of time. So yeah, I just said all of that, and I'm not editing it out because you know what? It's me, and I'm simply injecting me into this conversation because that's what this is about. That's what I'm talking about here. So when I saw Paul share this today, I'm like, gosh, I would love to hear an episode where Paul talks from his heart about what's going on. And so I got to hear, for example, I listened to the whole episode this morning, and I listened to him talk about the way he made his decision on where he and his family would live. They just sold their home, their home that they had in Auckland. They were renting for a while. I learned that they had this house that they were looking at, but they didn't have the right internet speed available, and that the high-speed internet that he would need because of wanting to be able to work from home and all the other stuff that they want to be able to do, it wasn't going to be available for a certain period of time, but then he's got this home that he's been renting out, but they've decided that they're going to stay there, and that it doesn't yet, it has decent internet available there, but the actual super ultra high speed internet that he's hoping for, I happen to know that that's actually going to come for him in February of 2017. Now, who cares? You know what? I care. Cliff Ravenscraft cares about where Paul Spain and his wife Selena live. I do care about their internet speed. Why? I don't know, but I just care because Paul cares. And that for me is important. It brings Paul down to a more human level of relatability. And you know what? I also love the fact that he talked about, he just brought up the idea of this Yi Home Wi-Fi camera. You know what's funny is I was just listening to This Week in Tech or Mac Break Weekly. I can't remember which one. Or it might have been Leo Laporte's actual radio show, which is called The Tech Guy. He has a podcast about that of that radio show, and I also subscribe to that because it helps me fall asleep. Leo Laporte helps me fall asleep at night many times. But anyway, I have these, not the Nest Cam. It used to be Drop Cam, and I actually bought this Drop Cam Pro back when it was owned before Google bought them, and now it's the Nest camera. But anyway, I have this Wi-Fi enabled camera for security reasons inside my studio. I can, it records, I think, automatically for up to 24 hours or 7 days. I can't remember. And if anything happens, I can download little clips here and there. I used to pay for the monthly subscription service, which gave me unlimited recording, and I could download up to 30 days and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I don't want that anymore. But he was talking about the fact that Leo Laporte was talking about these Yi Chinese manufactured cameras, which are pretty much the same exact camera, except for it just doesn't have the big, huge name brand from Google or Nest camera on it. And not only that, but there's no subscription service required. And instead of recording out to the internet, it actually records to a little SD card inside. And I'm thinking, and they're super, super cheap compared to the Nest Cam. I think Nest Cam, the Drop Cam Pro that I bought with the super 1080p or whatever. Actually, it might be 720. I don't know. Anyway, but I think it's like $199. But this Yi camera that he was talking about, and I looked it up online, it's only like $35, and they have some $49 ones. And I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty cool. And I got after listening to Leo, I was on Amazon. I was researching it. I'm like, that's interesting. But then today, Paul mentions it in his podcast as something he's looked into recently, these Yi Home Wi-Fi cameras, probably inspired by Leo as well. I have no idea. But anyway, I love that he's thinking about the same thing I was thinking about, and it reminds me, and maybe I do want to go ahead and just buy one of those and check it out. Who knows? But then he was also talking about, he's currently doing a test drive of a different power company to his house. And of course, why would that interest me? Well, it is interesting to me because I use a lot of power here in our home. We have a rather large home that my wife and I built. We consider ourselves to be living in our dream home, and it is the home that podcasting built, is what we call it. And anyway, we have a very energy efficient home, but still, I love the idea of what Paul was talking about. The idea is that he signed up with this new power company in New Zealand, and what they do is they put a smart meter on the home. Now, most of us have a power meter on our home that on the outside, it just tells us how much power our home is using, like just how many kilowatt hours, or I have no idea what it is. But anyway, the idea is it's just telling us total number of power used. Whereas with Paul, with this power company that he's test driving, he gets an app because there's an app he can log into, and it basically is monitoring the time in which his power is being used. And this company will actually bill you based upon the fluctuation in price. So there are certain times of day where power is less expensive. And so I guess the idea in my mind is the way I was thinking about it, it'd be cool because if you knew that power was, I don't know, I have no idea what even the numbers are, but if it was 45 cents per such and such, per kilowatt hour, if it was, that's probably ridiculously high, but again, it doesn't matter. But if let's just say it's 45 cents per something at from 10 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but it's only 17 cents from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m., well, gosh, all of a sudden, if you knew that, wouldn't you actually start doing things like washing your laundry and running the dryer during the evening instead of those peak hours? And anyway, it was pretty interesting. And, it just getting me to think about some of the future ideas and the technology that's going to be available. And just, I really enjoyed that. And then, of course, I learned that Paul Spain put down a deposit on a Tesla Model 3. And that he's thinking about autonomous driving and traffic and all that stuff in the future, and just other ideas that are going on in Paul's mind. It was absolutely fascinating to me, and I listened to the entire episode, and I was drawn in. And you know what? The question is would that format get me to subscribe? Now, the thing is I still am very much limited on the number of hours that I can spend listening to podcast content every single week. But I can tell you that for me personally, I was drawn to that because I know Paul, and getting to know what's going on in Paul's mind, and also specifically what's going on in his life and how it relates to technology. I love how he still kept it connected to the tech podcast that he has. It really added value to me. Now, I could tell you at the end of the show, he says, hey, I don't know how often I'll do this, but from time to time, he would do that. And so here's what I could tell you is I would love to know, Paul, whenever you do one of those, if you would email me and say, hey, Cliff, I did another solo episode. Now, I know you're not going to do that, and I don't expect you to do that for me. But, man, I will tell you, if I ever see you post that, hey, I did another solo episode today, and I'll listen to every single one of those. Or, well, unless you, I don't know. But I can tell you I was drawn in. I was drawn into that episode, and I loved it for all of those reasons. Now, I'm going to share with you an example. Mark Mason, again, this all happened today. And so Mark Mason, I listened to his podcast today, and actually I'm still listening to it. I haven't listened to the end. But I'm going to play the opening of this week's episode. Just totally out of the blue, this Mark Mason opens his late night internet marketing podcast with this.
Broadcasting late at night from a little studio in the big state of Texas. Your host, Mark Mason.
All right. I hope everybody's having an absolutely fantastic day. I'm not sure whether or not I am. I'm telling you, I'm a fantastic day sort of guy. I mean, I kind of carry my own weather around with me. I think that's a really important idea that I learned from Zig Ziglar when I was 18 years old. And I take my attitude with me everywhere I go. And I'm a happy guy, and I'm having a happy day almost no matter what's happening. Now, there's some exceptions, if there's something really bad going on, or, I'm not feeling great or whatever, that can affect my attitude. But generally, I'll try to power through that, because your attitude has a lot to do with your altitude. That's another Ziglarism, right? So I've got this kind of mindset about this, but right now I'm just not so sure. And that's because I'm friends with Pat Flynn. Now, you guys know this, and I was talking to Pat the other day, and he was telling me all about how he's been getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and getting all this work done. And I got all fired up, and I decided I am going to record the podcast at 4 o'clock in the morning. Now, you may be saying, wait a minute, Mark, it's late night internet marketing. How can you record the podcast at 4 o'clock in the morning? Wouldn't that be early morning internet marketing? And I don't know. I'm still trying to work that out. It feels awfully late to me. I'm looking outside the studio window, and it's still dark. So I think this qualifies as late night internet marketing still, but I don't like it. getting up at 4:00 in the morning. I normally get up at 5:30 in the morning. Okay. So I figured 4:00 in the morning, not a big deal. I'll just roll out of bed. Let me tell you something. I could barely work the coffee machine this morning at 4:00 in the morning. So Pat, I'm telling you, you're a crazy man. All right. Stop it. Stop influencing me. Stop getting in my head with these crazy ideas. Hey, so this week I've got some great stuff for you. I want to get right into it before I fall asleep right here on the mic.
All right, so there you go. That was 2.5 minutes almost of Mark Mason injecting more of Mark into the internet marketing podcast. Now, here's the thing. Mark has always been really good at bringing a lot of himself into his show. And it was just that this opening, right after seeing Paul's message here and listening to Paul's podcast episode, right after getting Liz's email conversation here, this just stuck out to me. It was even more Mark Mason, this is what's going on in my life right now, than normal. Although, again, Mark he always includes a lot of himself into his content and still maintains that focus on what his show is. So I am trying to always bring some of the podcasting stuff, and maybe not every episode of my podcast is about podcasting and all the podcasting nuggets, if you will, that people are looking for. But by the way, if you're all ever looking for podcasting nuggets from Cliff Ravenscraft, of course there's the old archives on the website, podcastanswerman.com. But certainly, at the very least, sign up for my newsletter, my weekly podcast development newsletter, where every single week I'm giving out the best tips, advice, strategies, tools, and techniques relating to podcasting. The best advice I've ever given over the past 10 years of helping thousands of people launch a podcast successfully. Head over to podcastanswerman.com/newsletter. You'll get an email every Friday with the best tips, tools, and podcasting nuggets. All right, so go over to podcastanswerman.com/newsletter. Anyway, but just if the question is, should you be injecting more of you into your podcast? I think that it is an extremely valuable thing. Do I think you need to change the format of your show if you're a Paul Spain to a solo podcast? No, I don't think you have to change. I think it's cool to. I definitely suggest everybody who has an interview-based format show to give a solo episode a try every now and then. Don't have to change it all the time, but to try it out. But even if you don't change that, feel free to open up the show every now and then with a 2.5 minute of, this is why I sound so tired and groggy today, because it's 4:00 in the morning. Mark Mason, love you, brother. All right, so anyway, some other things that I just would share with you here, just as going along with the thing of what's going on in my life, prioritizing things. My friend Mark Mason texted me yesterday and says, "Hey, just want to let you know, I put my podcast episode out," and I said, "Oh, that's great." And of course he goes, "It's your turn, or it's your move," is what he said. And I said, "That's cool." I said, "But I just finished working out for 60 minutes here in the workout room that I have here at the house, and I just burned 1,000 calories. That was my top priority for today." I said, "I've got some other priorities that are on my plate that I have next. I have some things to do, and so I don't know if I'm going to get the podcast out by 5 a.m. on Friday morning. It's not necessarily my priority right now to do that." And so, for example, yesterday I worked out. That was the number one priority. Later in the afternoon, I knew I had a one-on-one coaching call with actually a mentoring call, if you will. And then at 4:45, I knew that I needed to stop working 15 minutes early yesterday so that I could go to school and meet the teachers of my two oldest children. The high school had a meet the teacher night, so we had that. And then 6:30 p.m. last night, I knew that I was going to be going out to dinner with my whole family, and we were going to meet my mom and dad because they took me out to dinner for my birthday, which, by the way, is today, January 20th. That's, you may be wondering why there's all such a hoopla on January 20th every, several years. Well, every couple years, I think everybody just really gets excited about my birthday on January 20th. So, I think there might be something else going on today. I'm not quite sure, but anyway. But yeah, so last night we went out so I knew that I had at 9 o'clock, I wanted to have my workout finished. I knew at 2 o'clock I had the mentoring call. I knew that those things that I just told you about were priorities. Another thing that I knew I needed to do yesterday is I still produce my friend Dan Miller's podcast for him, as far as just making sure that everything sounds good. I basically put it up on his website and schedule it to go out on Friday morning, and then I let his team take it over from there. But every week I still do that for Dan. I don't do that for anybody else. I do not offer that kind of service, but it is something I've been doing for my friend Dan for many years now. And so that was a priority. I knew I needed to follow up with my accountant to get my 1099 forms. So everybody that I paid more than $600 to last year, or at least $600 to, I have to send them a 1099 form. And so I went and did that. I got those forms from my accountant. I knew that I wanted to follow up on my iMac. I have a couple different iMac computers, and one of them was at the Apple Store for repair. And I knew that I needed to follow up with that because they told me they'd contact me within 48 hours, and they hadn't contacted me yet. And, well, the cool thing is I have a virtual assistant. My assistant, Andrea, has been with me for, I don't even know how long now. I guess actually January 2012. I do know how long. Anyway, but Andrea, I just sent off a note to Andrea. I said, Andrea, here's my repair number with Apple. Here's the phone number to the Apple Store. Will you please call them and find out what's going on with my computer? And so that was a priority. And of course, she emailed me back and said, sure, Cliff, here's the information. They said it's available for you to pick up, and it's going to be $389. Here's what they did. They're open from, I think she said they're open from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. today and tomorrow. So she got me that information. I needed to follow up with her. The other thing was a priority. I needed to get my email for my mailing list, my newsletter update, because every Friday morning I send out that email newsletter. And so that is a major priority for me. And in fact, getting that email out to my mailing list, that's the podcasting nuggets. That's where the biggest, the most focused podcast advice, tips, and information you can get from me is from my weekly podcast development newsletter over at podcastanswerman.com/newsletter. But that was a major priority. Now, by the way, yesterday I wrote up the newsletter, and what was the newsletter? It's called The Fastest Way to Add New Subscribers to Your Podcast. Again, the fastest way to add new subscribers to your podcast. Now, if you guys signed up for my newsletter when it first came out, you got that email today. If you signed up the week after I launched my newsletter, then you'll be getting that email next week. If you sign up for my newsletter today, if you go to podcastanswerman.com/newsletter today, in 11 weeks, you will get the fastest way to add new subscribers to your podcast. And here's the thing. Yesterday, I spent probably about an hour and a half to 2 hours crafting the email that goes along with the short video. It's a little video clip for 3 minutes, and then I spent a long time. It's probably 2 hours that I spent putting that piece of podcasting nugget together, and I'm super excited about what I'm sharing there. And the cool thing I love about it is that anybody who signs up for my mailing list, they're eventually going to benefit from that. Every single person who's on my newsletter will eventually benefit from that piece of advice. And I love that it's logically starting them from where I know where people are starting from. Whereas, and this is one of the benefits of having a mailing list, my friends, is that I could say, hey, go back and start with episode 1 of my podcast. I don't want you to do that. In fact, somebody just recently asked me, say, Cliff, I'm relatively new to your show. I've been listening to you for the last 8 weeks, and I would love to know what is the best way to really get caught up to date for somebody who's looking to start a podcast. And I said, well, first I would encourage you to maybe check out my Learn How to Podcast tutorial. Although I did tell him, I said, listen, it's a little out of date with as far as the final video and stuff like that. But here's the thing, thousands, actually it's more in the tens of thousands of people who have actually used that tutorial to launch their podcast without any need of hiring me. The more technical people will be able to do that. And then I said, the next thing I would encourage you to do is maybe look at the gigantic list of topics in the sidebar of my website. And those topics, if you click on them, will take you to specific posts, mostly episodes of my podcast, where you'll hear content related to those topics. But I don't recommend anybody go back to the very first episode of this podcast and listen all the way through because, gosh, things have changed since December 2006, which is when this podcast started. And not only that, but there are some things I said last year. So even if you click on, well, for example, the very final video in the Learn How to Podcast tutorial over at learnhowtopodcast.com, that the service that I show you how to set up a free podcast, that service was purchased, it was acquired by another company and then shut down. So that's not even up to date. It's on my to-do list. It's not a high priority right now, but it's slowly coming back up on the list. But and even there are things that I talked about last year in the podcast that aren't necessarily up to date. But my mailing list, what I love about the mailing list is that everything that's in this newsletter, if something becomes out of date, that is the one place where I'm definitely going to go in and rewrite or reconfigure or come up with a replacement piece of information there. Or I could, if I need to, completely pull that post out of circulation. So, yeah, guys, email newsletters, do them. I, as you guys know, I am a proponent of podcasts, and podcasts are amazing. But trust me, there's still, with all of that I'm saying, there's a ton of evergreen content that is of great value in the prior, what are we looking at? In the prior hundreds of episodes of this podcast. But yeah, an email newsletter. Create one of those with your best content, best advice. I am so excited about my newsletter. But anyway, going back to this priorities, there are so many different things. I spent, that was my, I was answering all the questions for my podcasting A to Z students. That was actually at the very top of the list that wasn't scheduled. But yeah, there was all these other things. And here, by the way, here are the things that didn't get done yesterday. Recording this podcast. Email inbox 0. Oh my gosh, I am so far behind on emails. Here's the thing. I am prioritizing email. The only emails that I'm responding to at this moment in time are ones of people who have purchased equipment. And usually my assistant, Andrea, she handles all of that. But if anybody emails me about their equipment order, I make sure that instantly gets a response. If somebody has purchased a digital tutorial from me and has some kind of question related to their purchase, I instantly respond to that. Here's the thing. And if any of my students are contacting me via the course, of course, their stuff is above everything right now for 4 weeks because my students get my top priority attention during the 4 weeks of podcasting A to Z. But as far as all the other emails that are in there, they're just sitting there. They're piling up. And it's a little overwhelming. But you know what? I used to put my email inbox as a priority, and I would not do some other things. Like, for example, I'd spend all my day working on answering emails. And yeah, it's a ton of relationship building, and it does a lot of things. I'm adding value to a lot of people, which ultimately comes back in the end and all these other things. But gosh, if I would have spent time with my email inbox yesterday, I would not have gotten the newsletter out on time, or I would have been up at 4:00 in the morning still writing the newsletter. And so my email inbox there, I don't suspect I'll be at email inbox 0 for probably not until the week after I get finished with this session of A to Z, quite honestly. So if you've written me an email and it's not some dire, urgent business related thing to a purchase you just made, just know that it could take a little longer to get an email from me. I am still committed to answering everyone's email though. So, and I still do that. I wonder how long I'll be able to do it. I don't know. But anyway, I didn't get around to picking up the iMac yesterday. I didn't even think that I would. I didn't get around to reading as much as I would want to. I actually didn't read at all yesterday. And I did not work on my A to Z marketing strategy for A to Z 29, which starts on February 20th. So those are the things that I didn't get done yesterday. So then today, I'm like, okay, every day I start out with a brand new list of what are my priorities. And priority number 1 this morning, 7:30 a.m., workout. All right, so I did 45 minutes. I burned 600 calories, all good. All right. The other thing that I have scheduled at 2 o'clock this afternoon, I have an A to Z group coaching call. So that is definitely going to happen today. Then those are the scheduled commitments. And then the most important thing was A to Z inbox 0. That means that I'm up to date and current and have answered every question that has come in from every student of Podcasting A to Z. And so that was my priority after working out this morning, my scheduled priority of working out. So after I had finished breakfast and took a shower, got dressed, came down here, I answered all of the A to Z questions that had come in. And then I said, okay, now completely shut off all distractions. I have no social media to distract me. I'm not even seeing my email inbox and none of that stuff. After I finished answering A to Z questions, TCRS, the Cliff Ravenscraft Show, this podcast recording is the next priority. And so that's, and I knew that that's how it had to be. And just so you know, if you're interested, after this, my next thing, I'm going to confirm that Peter Fraser, it's either Fraser or Fraser, but I'm going to confirm that his emails are getting delivered to him now from my email newsletter. He happens to be one of my email newsletter subscribers who said, Cliff, I'm thinking about your A to Z course, and I am also interested in your newsletter. I signed up for it, but I'm not getting your emails. And I noticed, I went into his account and I noticed that it says that his first email bounced and his second email that we tried actually failed to deliver. And I've been working with my ConvertKit support team, and they said, hey, we'll remove all of those things, try to reset those emails and everything. So we're trying to figure out why his email service provider, his email client, is not accepting my emails. But I've got that to follow up on today. And then after that, I have email inbox 0. It ain't happening. But actually that shouldn't even be a priority there. And instead, right below that, process and mail all the 1099s. I got the 1099s from my accountant yesterday. So today I'm going to sign those and send those off to the people that I need to send them to. I'm also going to renew my P.O. box. I have a P.O. box for stuff to come and be delivered just in case I want to. Actually, it's mostly for all the internet domains that I have. I don't want to pay per domain to have privacy where my home address is not put out there in the public on all my domains. So I actually put a P.O. box on my domains. And anytime somebody that I don't know asks for my email or my mailing address, I give them the P.O. box. So I need to renew that. And then I've got A to Z marketing strategy. Probably not going to happen today. That's probably going to get put off until tomorrow. And then pick up my iMac. I am going to do that today. And I've got down that I want to do some reading and I want to enter some things into my gratitude journal. And also, I have a little thing down here that I want to add Liz Fulcher to my A to Z personal follow-up. Now, Liz, in her email previously, she says, "Hey, Cliff, I'm interested in your podcast or your podcasting course. I've been podcasting for a year and a half, so I'm no newbie, but I have a lot to learn." And so I'm going to be personally following up with Liz about that. And I made a note to myself to add her to the follow-up. So those are the kinds of things that I got going on. And that's how I make a decision of what I'm doing and what I'm not doing is I make a list every day of the things that I'd like to accomplish, the things that are scheduled. And then I always do what is the next highest priority item. So that at the end of the day, the goal isn't at the end of the day to mark off everything on my list. The goal at the end of the day is to ask myself did I do the most important things today? All right. So that's what it's all about. All right. I think that's pretty much everything. I haven't been I've said it a couple times here. I have not been reading as much as I want to. This is the year of growth and contribution. There are a couple different books that I'm currently reading. I think I've mentioned those previously. I'm not going to go into all of that. But one of them is this book called this one is actually from Viktor E. Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. And there was, I didn't get too far into the book, but I was listening to the audio version of it, and then I'm like, okay, I need to go into the Kindle version of this thing and highlight this one, and I definitely want to share this quote. This is from Viktor E. Frankl. He says, "Don't aim at success. The more you aim at it and make it a target, the more you are going to miss it. For success, like happiness, cannot be pursued. It must ensue. And it only does so as an unintended side effect of one's dedication to a cause greater than oneself, or as the byproduct of one's surrender to a person other than oneself. Happiness must happen, and the same holds for success. You have to let it happen by not caring about it. I want you to listen to what your conscience commands you to do and to go on to carry it out to the best of your knowledge. Then you will live to see that in the long run, I say, success will follow you precisely because you had forgotten to think of it." I love that. So I'm just going to end with that quote to give you something to think on. Guys, thank you so much for taking a listen to this podcast. If you have been thinking about creating your own podcast, or you want to take your existing podcasting efforts to the next level, my next session of Podcasting A to Z starts February 20th. Registration is now open at podcastingatoz.com. This is your opportunity to have me as your personal coach for 4 weeks, where you are my number one priority above all those other things that I just wrote about, except for my health and fitness. I will always work out, but I do that before 10 a.m. So anyway, where you are my number one priority in my business for 4 weeks, that's Podcasting A to Z. I want to help serve you any way I can. And if you have any question as to what that looks like, all you need to do is go to podcastingatoz.com. Currently, there are over 60 testimonials on that page. I encourage you to just pick 3, 4, or 5 testimonials, read them, and you'll get an idea of how much of my time, effort, and energy that you will get during a 4-week period of time. Also, if you're not on the newsletter yet, I'm reminding you here one more time at the end, podcastanswerman.com/newsletter. podcastanswerman.com/newsletter. Until next time, I encourage you to take everything you do to the next level.
Podcast Answer Man.